Welcome to Straight Talk for Entrepreneurs, where we reveal what it really takes to build a successful business. Whether you are starting with an idea or growing your business, this is the show for you. My guests and I will show you how to build a strong mindset, a powerful body, a profitable business. Hi, I'm Brandon C. White, and this is Build a Business Success Secrets.
Hey, buddy.
What's up?
How you doing? It's good to see your face.
Never better, man. Wait, look at you. You're in your gym.
I'm in my shop.
Oh, is that what it is? I was like, what
Yeah.
is that? Is that a laser cutter back there?
That's a 3D printer, and that's a bandsaw.
Oh, right on. So that 3D printer looks advanced.
It's shockingly, like, that whole market has gotten so easy to get into. That's a $300 printer right there. Like, you can get $500, $600 printers that can print in nylon filament and all kinds of crazy stuff.
So
It's awesome.
what can that thing, can print like real things?
Oh yeah. So I mean, it can print anything, about in this volume. This is the build plate, and it goes down. So, like, here, I have a whole bunch of pegboard that I put up over one whole shop wall, and I just printed this. So this is going to hold all my Allen wrenches in there. And so it's there's this awesome website called Thingiverse, and people put up things that they've designed, and, like, you just type for something. Like, I needed a vacuum reducer to go from one size vacuum hose to another, and I typed it in there, and someone had already done one, and I printed it. So it's
sick.
It's getting really out there. Like,
I don't even want to get that. That seems like a black hole.
it is. It's a total black hole, and there's a learning curve to getting the temperature and everything working.
I'm just gonna send things over to you.
Yeah, send me files. I'll print them. I'll send them.
Yeah. Wait, you have a mic on there? I think maybe if you sit closer or
okay. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, it's way better.
Okay, cool. Then I'll hang out here.
So what's happening in LA?
It's Hollywood is starting to ramp up again, which is good. My old crew is doing the Terminal List books, the Jack Carr books, and I waved them off into the sunset and said, have fun storming the castle. I'm doing the COVID thing.
Yeah,
which is interesting. It's weird for me.
Yeah, well, it's weird for me to text you, and I was like, hey, let's do this podcast on what it's like to be an armorer in Hollywood. And then what do you tell me? You're not even doing that anymore? Like, in all seriousness, Donnie, how's that just happen?
Strangely, so one of the things that I do on set as an armorer is do safety, and, like, look at a lot of moving pieces and try to figure out what we can and can't do. And I have experience at that at the highest level, while Michael Bay is screaming at me. And then I have a degree in molecular biology from way back when, from a whole other part of my life. And I needed a job, so I called up a guy who did studio safety, and I worked with him on a few shows. And I said, hey, actually, first, my sister got a job on Grey's Anatomy. She's a costumer, and she came and talked to me. She says, I show up on set, and there's, like, a person there who's like the COVID cop, and everyone's wearing masks, and there's all of this stuff going on. And I said, really? Because she was one of the first people to go back to work. This is, like, back in August of last year. And I say, and who's doing all of this? She says, like, the studio safety people now are doing this. So I called up my studio safety friend and said, hey, I know set, and I know a little bit about, genetics and molecular biology. Do you know anyone who's doing this? And he said, funny you should call. I just founded a company to do exactly this. So wow. I was like hire number, I think, 40. Now we have 80. We're about to have a whole lot more if Amazon and Apple want to play ball. And it's like, shit, I found myself in a safety company startup.
So were you not doing any movies at all?
Well, I've been on a couple of sets as a COVID officer doing compliance and all of that stuff, because that's our company's bread and butter, and that's how I started. Yeah,
but what about the armor stuff?
Nope, I turned it all down. I turned down a Michael Bay movie in January. I just turned down this Jack Carr thing. I mean, I could use a little bit of time off. I'm pretty bitter about the way that Hollywood has kind of treated my profession. So, I mean, we don't have to get into that part of it on your podcast, but it's I'll talk about the good times. But
So what was the last movie you did was Fast and Furious?
no, the last movie I did was a Chris Pratt movie called Tomorrow War, and it's going to come out soonish, I think, like in the next couple of months. And before that was John Wick 3. Before that was Godzilla, Rise of the Monsters, and before that was Fast and the Furious 8.
So let's just wind the story back for listeners just a little bit. Because I don't even, until I met you, I didn't really understand the whole Hollywood bit, and as anyone would, but that there's actually a person on set that their entire job is just to manage firearms and weapons, right?
Yep. Going back to the very beginning of the industry. I've got in one of the first Hollywood armories I ever worked at, there were pictures of movies from the 20s and 30s with people firing real guns into water to make splashes. And so, yeah, there have been people doing guns in Hollywood since there was a Hollywood. And as time has gone on, it's gotten more sophisticated and we've been able to do more things more safely. But there have been guns, like all of the major studios used to have their own internal armories. I have held guns that had MGM numbers engraved in them from when MGM owned them. And like most other studio services, studios used to have flower shops. Studios used to have drapery departments. Studios used to do everything internally. And as time went on and, MBAs came in and told them how wrong they were doing it, the studios got rid of one department after another. So most of the armories went away in the 60s and 70s and got picked up by private companies, which is where they're all housed today. So some of the largest armories on earth are in Los Angeles, where you wouldn't expect them because they service the movie industry.
And it's an armorer, right?
Yeah, armorer, or sometimes I've seen weapons master. Sometimes it'll just say prop master. Sometimes a gun will be run on set by a property master, and they never get that moniker.
Now, this profession isn't something that you just, I mean, as you would imagine, it'd be a pretty cool thing, right? Like, hey, I'm going to go do guns on Hollywood. So it's not necessarily this thing that you just put in your resume for. So how did you even get started? Because there's actually only a small group of you even in it, right?
So there's a large, every show will have a property master and usually a property assistant. Guns fall under the property department. So a prop is anything an actor touches, and it's very broad. When I was doing props, literally one day I went from doing a giant machine gun battle with Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and the next day we were doing a Thanksgiving dinner, and both of those are props. So it covers a huge amount of ground. When it comes to people who do just guns in Hollywood, they're at any given time 20 to 40. Some people do props and guns, some people do guns exclusively, but it's a pretty small group of people who do it professionally full time. And then that's Los Angeles. New York has its own people, its own laws. I've worked with those guys and they're amazing, in their own right. But I know mostly the Hollywood, LA side of it.
So as an armorer, over how many years you've been doing it? Because that's at least,
on set, legit on set 17 years. In terms of my time in the business, about 23, 24.
And you're effectively in this job as we've known each other. I've watched you or not watched you because you disappear into places like Iceland and deserts and things like that. You're really you're a freelancer, right?
Very much so.
You got to hustle or do business development or develop a reputation that people want you. And then you got to sign up with the movie. So who hires you? The director, the producer, the studio? How's that work?
All of the above. It has all, different shows, different people on. Hollywood is, you go to the movie theater, back when we went to the movie theater, and you'll see this big Warner Brothers logo, and you go, oh, Warner Brothers made this movie. And it's like, well, Warner Brothers was involved in it, but no one pays attention to like those second and third title cards, which would be, the production companies. And those are the people who actually put together the production team and make the movie under a Warner Brothers banner. So I usually get hired by people inside of the production. They will hire my boss, who is the property master, and then he will hire me in the capacity of an armor. So, and it's not, there's a ton of weird jobs on a set, like, someone who knows how to run all of the trucks and the trailers, the transport department, costume designers. Every single department gets hired by either the producer. Sometimes you'll be attached to a director, but that's fairly rare for what I do. Sometimes a producer will know and call you directly. Sometimes it'll be a production designer who is the person who's kind of in charge of the whole art department of which props is a part. So it can vary tremendously depending on the show, which makes it both be kind of anti-fragile in the sense that a large number of people who can hire you. It can also be really brittle, because very often that whole team of people can go to other countries to make a movie for whatever reason, and then we can't go. So we're an LA crew, a US crew, and some countries we can go to and some countries we can't. So it varies a lot.
And then this job is not a 9 to 5. I mean, so can you explain for everybody listening, because we can never get a hold of you when you're on set for these 3 and 4 month, 5 months. I don't even know what they're like deployments, aren't they, Donnie?
So James Cameron, director of Terminator and many other very good movies, has a great quote. He says, "Filmmaking isn't art; it's a war." And no disrespect to any servicemen out there, I don't want to compare what I do to what they do, but it's about the closest thing. A production company is very much like a military unit. It's organized that way. And because of how expensive actors are, you get yourself an A-list actor and it's, millions and millions of dollars, plus all of the equipment. The equipment is all phenomenally expensive. So there is this drive to work long hours to shorten the overall length of production. If you had a 9 to 5 job, making a movie could take a year and a half, and, that would be prohibitively expensive. So they compress the whole thing into this really short time window, and that ups the stress. It ups everything, including the money that you can make. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's definitely the lifestyle is very long hours in relatively rough conditions. I have filmed in the Sahara Desert during sandstorms. I have filmed on top of glaciers in Iceland, but I've also got to film underneath the space shuttle. Like the last shuttle to launch, I was standing under it. So it gives and it takes. It has this incredibly stressful, difficult aspect to it, but also this very rewarding aspect to it. And some shows are more rewarding than others. Let's put it like that.
I think as you're talking, the thing that comes to mind for me is that movie with Robert Downey Jr. and
Tropic Thunder.
Yeah, Tropic Thunder. Is it really like that? Like, do they sit around the table and feed you good food, and then like Lex Grossman comes in?
So funny enough, Lex Grossman character is based on Harvey Weinstein. So it's like that was.
Is
that
it
was,
really? Well,
yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
That would have been funny before, but now
it's.
Maybe that scares me, but he was funny. I didn't even realize that was what was that? That was Tom Cruise's like way back from when he sat on his head with Oprah or something, right?
Yeah, it's about that era. But yeah, everyone who does my job loves that movie because they really nailed some of the kind of on set key, kind of like the inside baseball pieces of it. They totally nailed.
So that's real.
Parts of it are real. It's I'm a big fan of the Anna Karenina principle, which is the first line of the book is happy families are all alike and each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. That applies to every single film set. Uh,
Right.
every happy film is the same and every unhappy film is unhappy in its own way. And I've never been on a happy film. They all are like filmmaking is this crazy uh, balancing of polarities because that's where the magic happens. You have the whole technical budgetary side of it, and then you have the whole artistic side of it. And if a movie has too much money, they create crap. If they don't have enough money, they create crap. And so you kind of have to keep those things like in dynamic opposition. And so there's always these weird stresses and situations that happen. Some of them you couldn't make up. A Hollywood writer couldn't make up some of the situations. And then you have the personalities and the egos.
So
It's a
you get to see that like front and center, don't
Oh
you?
yeah, oh yeah. No, I mean, there's been more than once where I've just had to like, hang my head and hide in a corner because two people decided to have it out like on set. That happens. I say it happens all the time, but it definitely has happened. And then I've worked in situations where every single person was so professional, top to bottom, that literally the set being washed away in a flash flood didn't phase anybody, because you immediately roll into the next thing. It varies. It varies so much, and the weather gets a vote. We were doing Flags of Our Fathers, a Clint Eastwood movie about the storming of Iwo Jima, and we were on a beach in Iceland, and it's like, and the tide came up and washed away the set, and what do you do? It's like, oh, you go film something else, and the more professional and experienced the group you're with is, the more you can roll with the punches. But like, there's always going to be punches. It's not a 9 to 5 job, and it is, one of my favorite. Can I curse on your podcast?
You can do, yeah, whatever
Okay,
you want.
cool. One of my favorite sayings: "Shit that never happens every day."
So wait,
Definitely
okay,
there.
are you even allowed to like comment? Because you were on how many Fast Five things were you on?
Only did one. I did Fast
Oh,
and the Furious 8, and
so
but
is there really fighting between Dwayne and whatever the what is it? Dwayne
yeah,
Johnson and
uh, and Vin Diesel. Yeah,
yeah.
so I was on that show. I was the second unit armor. So I was in Iceland with just racing cars on a lake. I hardly interacted with the main cast at all. I've worked with Dwayne before, and all I can say is that he is just one of the sweetest, most professional guys. I would work with Dwayne again in a second, but I wasn't on that set for those
So when
interactions.
you were in Iceland, you guys none of the actors were there. It was just
Nope.
you.
One showed up. Tyrese Gibson showed up for I think 1 or 2 days to say a line into a microphone, but that was almost all. No, that was all car chases. So that's one of the things that happens on a movie is that if you have a lot of action, very often there will be a whole nother unit that does nothing but that action, and sometimes that unit's in another country. So on Fast and the Furious, I was in Iceland for I think almost 3 months. Meanwhile, they were filming with the main actors back in Atlanta, and I never saw them. So it's that's one of the things that people kind of forget is you see two people who are in a movie together, they may never have met. If their scenes don't overlap, if they don't actually interact on camera, like that happens on TV shows all the time, where you'll have like two different storylines going, and those two storylines may never cross, or they crossed once, in the third season, and that was the only time they saw each other. And it's like, you guys were on the same show for 8 years. It's like, yeah, and we saw each other for like 5 days. That does happen.
Now, when you're on set and you're dealing with all these do you teach these actors and actresses how to use it? Because if they don't know how to use it and they don't know what's authentic,
Mhm.
then it's going to look fake.
Right. So sometimes some shows will have dedicated technical advisors. So former military, former FBI, whatever the correct person is, who will be hired specifically to show them some of those things. Sometimes it's me who's doing it. So I'll show up on some TV show and hey, this person's a cop and they've never, playing a cop and they've never held a gun before, and I will give them a quick on-screen, here's how you stand, here's your stance, here's how you look like the person that you're supposed to look like. But that's not the main part of my job. The main part of my job is kind of the getting of the guns, the management of the guns, the safety of them on set. And like, I honestly, most of the time could care less whether or not the actor looks good, because the safety piece is so dominant that that's almost always someone else's job. Now, I'll work very closely with that person, and, making sure that the gear is set up right, and that all of those pieces and parts are available for the actor. Like, on this show that I just did, it was a Chris Pratt movie called Tomorrow War that's coming out soonish, I think, in the next couple of months. There was one actress who had to do a very fast, competent looking reloading scene on camera. And so it was me and her and Harry Humphreys, who's one of the best technical advisors in Hollywood. I love the man to death. Founding member of one of the SEAL teams, like way, way back guy. And he has a ton of experience. He's been Michael Bay's technical advisor forever. And we worked with this actress for, probably a solid 10, 15 hours to make it look like
Oh, wow.
she's a serious shooter. Now, it was, 2 hours here, 2 hours there over a course of many days. And it paid off. It looked great. And so very often that kind of thing is a team effort. But like, while we were there, hey, there was a costumer there the whole time, making sure that her clothes looked the same between every single take. And there's hair and makeup there, making sure that, as she sweats, her face shine is the same consistently. It's like, knowing reality and how things work in the real world is one thing. Learning how to fake reality over and over and over and over again consistently the exact same way, that's hard. It's like, everyone puts on clothes every day. Not everyone makes sure their clothes looks exactly the same at every single moment of every single day. So it's
So
like,
you see movies differently.
oh yeah, no, I can't not. I mean, I can go escapist and I can ignore the filmmaking aspect of it. And sometimes I'll get caught wondering how someone did something. But, I come from a Hollywood family. My sister's a costumer. My aunt was a costumer. So like, continuity, like, I notice, and I can't not notice. So like, I'm constantly paying attention to the level of water or drinks in glasses. And I watch them jump up and down, which they're not supposed to do. You watch ice melt. It's not supposed to melt, over the course of a 1 minute conversation. But that 1 minute conversation on camera took 5 hours to film. I can't, it drives me insane to watch, guns not be reloaded, to, watch slides locked back and then they're immediately, in editing. That's something I get a lot from gun people, is like, hey, how come they never reload guns in Hollywood? It's like, well, because we could film a reload. We could film a reload realistically and accurately for every single take we do. But how the editor edits it might make it look like that reload went away. So if you want to see really good, consistent gunplay, you watch something like John Wick 3, because I was on it. But in order to make it that good, I cared about reloading. Keanu cared about reloading. The director cared about reloading. And he made sure that when he was in the editing bay, he put that in there in the right place. And so, strangely enough, on that movie, I did reload choreography, which was the first time I've ever had to do that. And so as Keanu is walking through the set, figuring out where different people get shot, etc., I'm walking behind him with my fingers up, going, it's like, okay, you have 10 rounds left, and literally going as he shoots people. And then I call a stop to the action and I go, okay, you need to do a reload here. And they figure out how the reload works in the scene. And then it's like, okay, he's down a magazine, and I had these charts that I would keep, like a quarterback on my wrist, with the whole scene mapped out, where reloads need to happen, etc. But you have to have everyone involved and caring to make something look right, which is why you have all of the kind of Hollywood tropes and conventions about, hey, how come you never reload guns? It's like, because editors don't know you have to reload guns.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, John Wick, 1 and 2 had more gunshot. I just felt like I was watching everything shoot, but it does, as you're talking, I'm like, man, it's pretty realistic. Like, he does reload. It looks legit, and it probably makes a difference that people don't even realize, right? Because it's those, you ever leave a movie and you're like, oh, that was a good movie, but I don't really know why. But and I think those things now do. actors and actresses request you too? So it just sounds like there's no, it could be an actor or actress that requests you and likes working with you, or it could be a producer, it could be a director, it could be a studio, and you just sort of sign up.
Yeah, yeah, it's never been an actor or an actress for me. Believe it or not, so like every actor or actress has their own, many will have their own costumer. Most will have their own hair and makeup. Most do not have their own armor, you know. Even action stars do a lot of movies where there could be years in between, you know, when they need an armor. So there have been a few guys who have been attacked people over the years, but it's pretty rare, believe it or not.
So you've been doing the armor thing for many years. I'm still a little bit shocked that you're making a move. I'm actually encouraged and excited for you because I think that takes a lot of courage to do. But I want to ask you this because I haven't heard an update. And actually, I was in LA last week. I'm going to be in LA next week, so we'll maybe catch up. Um, Seems that LA is completely open from what I experienced riding my bike through Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, Venice Beach, Santa Monica, down to Palos Verdes. Seems that all is normal. So, I don't know what to say there, but you're writing a screenplay. Are you still doing that?
That's a little bit on hold at the moment. You know, 2020 was trying in a lot of ways, and I hope to pick it up again someday. But as of right now, it's kind of in a holding pattern. I can't start up and a script at the same time.
No, I think that's hard. So you switch over, you're doing this safety thing. Are you, I'm curious as your thoughts because you sound really excited about it. And quite frankly, I think you're burned out from the armor stuff. I think you like it, but I think it took its toll. You were really kind and let my brother and my nephew, who is a professional shooter, and my sister-in-law, come on a set in Georgia. Was that your last gig?
Yeah, that was my last gig.
What
Yeah,
was
that
that?
was
Was that
COVID
the
came
Tomorrow?
down. That was yeah, that's tomorrow.
Got you. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my last gig, at least doing guns.
Yeah, they were really excited. My nephew, get to see the real thing. So are you, what do you think? Like the safety thing, do you think this is going to have a shelf life because we're going to get a hold of this COVID thing in 2 years and then there's no market or what are you thinking?
Uh, so that's an interesting question. You know, COVID is one aspect of, you know, studio safety. When COVID goes away, shift focus into some other aspect of it. I fully suspect to go back to the gun thing at some point, simply because, the running joke that I've been the young guy on the crew for the last 20 years. Many positions in Hollywood because of runaway production and filming in other states. Hollywood hasn't done a very good job of training new people in a lot of positions. So crews have never been older. Let me say this, experienced good crews have never been older. Most of the people who do mine are 50s and 60s. So I think there'll probably be a time where I do go back simply because the demand, supply demand fundamentals have changed a lot. But we'll see. It's Hollywood is a strange business, and it's in a bit of a state of flux at the moment. No one quite knows what to do other than make giant superhero movies. You know, story wise, what's our narrative? Like there's large societal issues. People aren't willing to be daring. So it's interesting. It's a good time to step away from the production side of things and kind of get into a different position.
I
But
gotta
I'm
tell
sure I'll
you,
be back. I'm sure there'll be an offer.
I gotta tell you, I agree. I understand the, I don't know what to call it, Donnie, movements or awareness that people want to have about things. But it seems like you can't open your mouth without apparently offending someone. And it turns into like, I mean, at some point, you can't be offended by everything. And I think that the world is everybody wants to love one another. I tend to think that I'm interested in your thoughts on this because you and I have talked about all sorts of different stuff, everything from Star Wars script that you're disgusted with because it went off track to, you know, life in general. But the, where does this go? Like when comedians, here's what I watch all the comedians on Instagram because basically Yvette and I don't watch the news anymore because most of it's fake, in my opinion. And all it will do is mainly depress you. So we watch comedians every single night before we go to bed. I mean, I do not know during COVID, Donnie, how many times we watched Eliza. We love what's his name, the Italian guy. I probably get in trouble for saying that, right? Like, hey, the Italian guy, Sebastian. Um, I mean, we watched Delirious like 50 million times, and Richard Pryor, and we were watching Dave Chappelle the other night, and you know, and who else? Chris Rock. Who else? I forget the other guy. But now comedians are having to preface their jokes to basically say, "Hey, don't start picketing outside my house. It's a joke." Like, what are we going to kill comedy with this craziness? Like, what do you think about all this?
Well, bringing comics in this time is very interesting because, in a very real way, the role of the court jester is that he's the only person allowed to speak the truth because he's allowed to do it in a humorous way. And, you know, the if you live in a place where the king kills the court jester, you're living in a tyranny. That's how you know you're living in a tyranny, is that the court jester is not allowed to speak the truth anymore. So I really think that that is one big aspect of this, which is that it is it's a deep desire to control, and it's a tyrannical aspect. I think that I I think that also, like, so in addition to that, the other big piece of the equation is that what you're looking at is a religious impulse. I forget who it was who said it, but he said that every person has a God-shaped hole. So you have the neurology you're born with the neurology for something like religion. And something is going to occupy those neurological structures and cause, and fulfill those archetypal demands in that sense. So when you listen to a lot of the language that's being used, you're hearing a lot of religious language. You're hearing a lot of that person's a blank denier. When you hear the word denier, you're hearing Protestant Christian Reformation war language. So I think that what you have is a very large number of people, and this isn't anything against atheism whatsoever. But you have a very large number of people who think that they're atheists, who actually have adopted a civil religion, and you're watching them play out these religious impulses. A lot of what we're looking at right now looks an awful lot like the Spanish Inquisition. It looks an awful lot like witch burnings, because that's exactly what it is. It's people who don't have you're basically watching people invent a religion from scratch, which is always a very ugly thing, you know. From like an archetypal point of view, from a Jungian point of view, I think that's what you're seeing. Now, there's truth to it. You know what I mean? Especially for young people. Young people are in a position where working class wages haven't budged since 1971. Where baby boomers aren't retiring and freeing up spaces in the workplace, where no young person can buy a home in any major city unless you happen to be a massive tech success. Um, that all has consequences. There's a pot and it's got a fire under it, and that fire is simmering. And from a larger perspective, we're coming to the end of the post-World War II era. We've had the same narrative for the last 80 years. That narrative hasn't been working for a large number of people for quite some time. I think that as time goes on, that narrative holds less and less truth for more and more people, whether you call that narrative the American dream, you call it work hard and be rewarded. We have this software that's been running since the end of World War II, and it keeps returning an error code. And all of the younger people who haven't made it yet keep saying, hey, we're getting an error code. And all the baby boomers, keep going, hey, look at the new vacation house I just bought. And it's this, intergenerational conflict that is normally solved by, a great crisis. And, I heard this very interesting analysis talking about, imagine a person who was born, your average kind of like millennial Gen Zer. It's like you're a young person and 9/11 happens. And then you're a little bit older and the 2008 financial crisis happens. And then just when you're ready to, get into the world, COVID happens, and it's like, where's the wealth accumulation supposed to come from? Where's the down payment for the family house supposed to come from? How's family formation supposed to start? All of these things have been denied them by the structures that we have. And so what do? They're going to attack that structure. And they have no monetary power. They have no voting power. What they do have is social power. And so kind of cancel culture, I think, is at least a partly that. It is that, it's what was the book? It's the tools of the powerless, weapons of the powerless. It's just because a person doesn't have traditional structural power doesn't mean that there aren't things at their disposal that they can attack the system with. And I think that that's a decent chunk of what you're looking at. All of that mixed together, shaken, it's something in there. Most of the pieces of the puzzle are in there.
And what's even more interesting to me is those stories get retold through Hollywood, because that's really how America consumes it. So I find it, I think what you said is true. There's a lot of truth, right, when it comes to discrimination and that wealth gap and all that. I tend to be more positive. I'm not saying that they're negative. I'm just saying there are some good stories in America. There are some really good stories in America. And, I look at myself and, you could say, well, you're a tech nerd, Brandon, who got the tech thing and got your house in Half Moon Bay. But, the truth of the matter is that 20 years ago, thinking that I was going to, I was just actually, believe it or not, got my hair cut today because my wife told me that I could never cut my hair again, because apparently I can't do a fade in the mirror well. Yeah. And last time I went and got my hair cut, the lady was like, we got to take this thing all the way down. And then my wife said I look like an anarchist, which was partially true, I guess, because it looked like I could do a mohawk. But I think what we were talking about today is a lot of what you just described in that gap and that delta between different parts of society. But I also think it's a mindset. I mean, sure. I got to be more positive. Maybe it's just in my nature, but 20 years ago, did I want $1 million house? Yes. Did I think it was possible? I wanted to think it was possible. Did I really think it was possible? I don't know. It seemed like a ton of money. In fact, it still is a ton of money, right? I mean, but when you put yourself and you say, hey, I just got to rise to the top, there's always an excuse why you can't do something. Absolutely. There's only one or two why you can. And, I always ask the question, Yvette we were talking about today, something I was like, well, why not? Like, why not? Why not? Why couldn't we do that? Or why can't that person do that? And yes, some people have the odds stacked against them. But I think it's interesting that you say it's a good time to take a break in Hollywood because the stories that are going to come out of there and be told are going to be different, right? And they're definitely going to be interesting. The narrative going on. All I can say is this: I think what you said is really important. When the king kills the court jester, and we can't laugh at ourselves, like I'm thinking we're probably in some trouble, because when you lose laughter and you lose the ability to laugh at yourself, and like I said, there's been some serious stuff that shouldn't happen, right? Definitely. And I think COVID just made everything worse. I think it turned it up to the red line, maybe past the red line. I don't have kids. You don't have kids. So, I think it'd be unfair for us to know what it would say, what it would be like. But it definitely is crazy, Donnie.
Yeah, it's a crazy time. But it's you and I have talked about this. I'm a huge fan of the Fourth Turning book and the idea of 80-year crisis cycles, and we're right in the middle of one. It's depending on when you really kind of chart the peak of the last crisis. Some people, say it was 39 and Hitler invading Europe and Poland. Some people say it was Battle of Midway, but we're right in the window for one of those major crisis points. I think that we would be much more aware of that if the Fed hadn't printed $19 trillion out of thin air and thrown it in the money hole. Those are tools that today are available because we're a global empire and have the reserve currency. If we didn't have those tools, I think that the nature and scope of the crisis would be much more visible. I think that this time's different, in a series of unique ways. The millennials are supposed to be, from an archetypal point of view, the next World War II generation. They're supposed to face the massive crisis, overcome, and be the source of rebirth. And they've been denied their crisis. If 2008 was going to be a Great Depression, they papered over it. If COVID is going to be the crisis, they're managing it, nudging it, and not letting it really become one. So I think that's
I think what happened there, Donnie, is I think the world powers changed, right? Mm-hmm. And they almost, I'm not defending it. I studying the market, I understand what's going on. I'm not understanding how we get, I understand how we get out of it initially. I don't understand what happens in 5 or 10 years, but, yet to be determined on that one. I think it's going to be super interesting. But, one thing as I listen to you, Donnie, every generation has a narrative like this. I mean, the baby boomers had the narrative. What are you and I'm X gen? Like, I mean, everybody's like, oh, well, it wasn't like that when I was there. This is so much different. So let me give you an example. And also, I am a friend of mine the other day. I was like, well, I don't really know if that's true. And he's like, Brandon, you question everything. Well, yeah, I question everything because I actually don't know that just because you fed me some statistics, it's not true. So let me give you an example. Everybody, and I bet you've heard this narrative. Everyone's leaving California, right, Donnie? Yeah, everybody's leaving California. They're all going to Austin. They're all going to Denver. Well, so I went to the raw data, took a look. Doug, it takes a minute. It does take a minute. And looked at the postal codes because the post office actually knows where people are moving because of the forwarding addresses.
Okay.
The majority of people aren't leaving California, Donnie. The majority of people are moving within California.
Oh, interesting.
Because now they don't have to be they don't have to live in San Francisco or downtown LA, or they don't have to live in Studio City. Right. I mean, right. Now you can work. A lot of people can work remote, or if you're not working remote, you're probably going to work remote. Like that's the way. So people are moving out of the cities because they've gone absolutely nuts living in 600 square foot apartments. And it's just interesting. So I'm not using that to debate one way or the other. All I'm saying is the narrative in the news or the narrative in Hollywood doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It
Sure.
just means that's the story that's being told. Now, the dangerous part of that is the story being told can be perceived to be true, which means it's true.
Right. Or it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, exactly. So, but here's what I know. When comics have to give disclosures in the middle of a joke, it, you
It's
know,
a problem. It's indicative of a much more serious problem.
and look, I was watching Delirious, or what's Eddie Murphy's other one, his first one, and there's some derogative comments he made in there
Mm-hmm.
for sure. Um, having said that, he's not trying to be evil.
No, no, he's trying to get to a truth that is hard to get to.
Right. That's why you laugh, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
the whole point.
The whole point.
The whole point you laugh. So,
It was a place that you knew existed that you couldn't quite put your finger on. That's the comic's job, is to find that edge between the known and the unknown and explore it.
yeah. And I worry. So I hope we get through it. And maybe for you, you're more on the sideline of this thing through this new venture, but I'm excited for that for you. What have you, so is this what you, because I actually lost touch with you. I feel like COVID just like has a time warp, but
Mm-hmm.
the movies did shut down because of the
Oh
insurance,
yeah,
right?
hugely. That's one of the reasons why I'm jumping ship. Was big action movies, which is my bread and butter. They didn't make one in 2020.
And that was interesting. Can you talk about that? Because I actually didn't realize. I was like, oh, well, it makes sense, COVID. But you had pointed out that it's actually the insurance companies that won't insure the big actors, which is really the cause of that. Is that right?
That's definitely a piece of it. A movie has so many moving parts and so many people are irreplaceable, whether it's your director or your A-list actor, etc. So how do you insure a movie? How do you get a completion bond when there's a chance that your actor could be sick for a week or two or three or not be able to come back? So it took Hollywood some time to figure out what the protocol should be to come back, to demonstrate that they could come back safely. And that's really what I've been involved in since September, is kind of on the ground proving that you can get groups of people together working in a COVID environment and do it safely. And it costs money. You've got to spend a lot of money on testing. You've got to spend a lot of money on PPE. But Hollywood, I'm not going to say that Hollywood hasn't had any on-set transmission, because there has been, but it is shockingly small compared to the number of people and interactions that exist on a film set.
Well, that's interesting. I want to ask you, we can come back to this, but I forgot 3 times to ask you this as we're talking, is what do you think is going to happen now that these movies are being released at home on Netflix? Like when that first movie Wonder Woman came
Mhm.
out, I told Yvette, I said, this is the end, because once you do it once, it's very, very, very hard to take it away. I'm not saying that you can't take it away, but once you're on the drug and you've effectively cut the middleman out, if you can. I mean, I don't know net. I haven't looked at the sort of the financial thing yet. What do you think about this? I mean, this is really a big deal.
It certainly could be. And studios traditionally kind of controlled their own pipeline, and had specific slots in the theaters to release certain projects. And yeah, what does it mean if all of a sudden people can't go to the movies? Do we still make $300 million features when you can't get $1 billion worth of box office out of it? Um, I know that one of the things that was really screwy about this were actor contracts. So, you make some big movie in 2019 and the actor is guaranteed a percentage of the box office. What happens when there's not a box office? You know what I mean? So there's all kinds of very interesting legal contractual questions that get brought up when you release things on streaming.
Yeah. So
What?
what's going to happen? I'll be honest. What for us, a lot of people, I like to go out to dinner and I sort of miss that, but I've also really quite candidly enjoyed sitting home with the vet and eating dinner in a quiet environment and actually spending like real time together. So, uh, uh, I haven't gone crazy at all. We've in fact enjoyed it. And the, I wouldn't say we're not going a little stir crazy. Vet said the other day, like, I think everybody's just tired. Right. But we got studio, well, I don't know what you call them, but I hate to say we got a lazy boy because that would, I don't know. But we got studio seats that recline. We've got not this gigantic TV, but a nice TV. And Yvette and I were just talking about this at dinner last night. I didn't even, that's what maybe made me think about you today when I pinged you. But I was like, well, I'm actually okay with these releases because now we save 40 minutes. I love the movies, by the way, just so, and I think you know this, but for anybody out there who's like Brandon's a movie theater hater, absolutely not true. Yvette and I used to go to the movies almost every weekend together, every Sunday or every Saturday when we could get through Half Moon Bay traffic in between. We would go and we went out to dinner and it was sort of like date night every week. So I love the movies and I haven't been able to replicate movie popcorn, but we've gotten pretty close during COVID. But I say 40 minutes, we save 40 minutes, 30 minutes going to the movies. We don't have to park. We don't have to do any of that. And we watch it here. So there's a real convenience to
Sure.
that you can get used to. And, if you have a bunch of kids, it's a heck of a lot easier to buy the movie for $25, have everybody over and sit in front of the movie and do that. So do you think that's going to stick based on what you know?
Well, it's interesting. I think that, you and I are both introverts. And so I think that we are not representative of the average population. I think that the extroverted piece of the population will go back, but it'll be interesting to see what they go back for. I think that like big movies with some movies just play better on the big screen. Like I would not want to watch the new Blade Runner on my TV. I don't care how good it is. Like some movies you just need to see. Like if Dune ever comes out, I want to see Dune in the theater. I don't want to watch Dune on
What do
my
you mean
TV.
if Dune ever comes out?
Well, if they decide to hold on to it, or
Oh, you
you
mean,
you may know more about the release schedule than I do. I just know that
I
it's
don't know anything about it. I'm just trying to figure out if you know something that you can, did they start making it and then they
oh,
stopped?
they're done, or at least so they're dividing it into a couple, and
Oh,
I don't know how many they've divided it into, but one of them's done, and it's like, well, what do we do? It's like the serious question. If you have like a big theatrical movie, do you hold on to it for the next 2 or 3 years until we're all back in theaters or whatever
I
we're
see what you're
watching?
saying.
That's
My
that's
question is, can the theater, I mean, if you look at the financials,
Oh, they're terrible.
AMC, like how do they have real estate costs? I mean,
Oh
those are
yeah.
real costs. So my question is even one, does Hollywood stick with the release schedule that way? And two is, are there any theaters left?
It's an interesting question. It's if you are going by the 2019 strict rules, they should already be gone. But I think a bit of it is that old saying, if what is it? If you owe the bank $1,000, you have a problem. If you owe the bank $1 billion, the bank has a problem. And so, hey, here are all of these theaters. They're all anchoring these mall properties. Do we all just pretend that everything's going to go back to normal any day now and just kick the can down the road as far as we can? It's like, hey, it works for the Fed. Maybe it works for AMC. I don't know. I don't know how those discussions are being figured out, but like, what does the mall do? I mean, the malls aren't in any position to go shutting down. Dude, the mall in my town where I grew up in, suburbs of Los Angeles, uh, is now a post office. One of
What?
one whole branch of it is now a United States postal post office.
Well, that's like the most secure rent. Well, I don't
Yeah,
know. Maybe the post office is going to go away too. It's hard to tell.
it's hard to tell. No
But
one. The
yeah,
future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, right?
The what?
The future is already
Oh,
here. It's just not evenly distributed.
yeah, you're probably actually
That's not
you
my quote. That came from someone much smarter than
you
me.
can I can tell you work in Hollywood. You
How
got
come?
you got all these quotes, man. You got like all the sayings. You got all the good one-liners. I don't have any of that.
You have to have metrics. You have to have the aphorisms, because when you work in a world that is mostly chaos, um, there are no standards. It's kind of Nassim Taleb's book, The Bed of Procrustes, which is just nothing but aphorisms, because aphorisms, they're like zip files. They can contain wisdom that will never show itself on a spreadsheet. Which I say now that most of my job now is moving numbers around spreadsheet. I've become the person that I always hated. But it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
for
that
for
that
somebody knocking on MBAs all the time. But so are you on set with this, or are you management, or what are you doing?
not at the moment. Right now, I'm doing mostly business development. Um, as more and more shows come back, there have been people started making shows again last summer, but it was relatively small, and it's kind of tentative steps to see how big of a show we can make. And this year, many studios have or are going to try to do. I'm not going to say full production schedules because I don't see their whole production schedule, but much more ambitious than they were last year. So more need of more trained people, more need of more testing, more PPE, more training, all of that kind of stuff.
What's
So
PPE?
personal protective equipment, so masks and face shields and disinfecting stuff and gloves and kind of all of the things that the
That
individual.
that that must have added a significant cost.
I'm sure it has. Testing is probably the most expensive piece of the equation. I have a belief, and this is not, my company talking or anything. It's just my belief is that I think COVID, if you want to deal with COVID effectively, it adds a 5 to 15% tax on the cost of doing all business.
Oh, that just makes sense. I mean, it's just it's what it costs. Well, I don't want to get off on that topic. I was thinking about Australia the other day. Uh, Gia, my EA, was, I think, telling me that they're like totally back to normal because but if you and I open that can of worms, we'll probably get in trouble. Because I don't, I'm conflicted. I read today that Texas opened up 100% with no mask. Like
I heard.
they've got 6.9% of the population vaccinated. I mean, is it good or bad? Trust me, I got a lot of friends who, and I know you do too, have small businesses that have been absolutely crushed.
Crushed.
And was it right or not? I just it's an interesting question to talk about, but I don't know that anyone will have the answer. So I don't know how much time we'll spend, because really what we should spend our time is fixing these things, like these local restaurants. As much as Yvette and I have cooked at home, we do try to eat out. I know that sounds crazy. I think I put on 5 extra pounds because of it, but I'm trying to ride my bike, ride it off. But what do they say? You can't out exercise a bad diet. Um, it's not on the plant paradox, which I'm interested to see if you're still on. But yeah, I mean, you just got to support these businesses. It's crazy that to shut them down just completely.
Yeah, I mean, hey, was it even legal? Question mark.
I
It's,
don't
I'm sure.
even, yeah, legal anymore is another interesting discussion to have. But
Isn't it though?
like, I don't know. I mean, laws are made by people who had an opinion at the moment with the facts they had and change frequently. I don't know.
That assumes good faith. Not that it wasn't. One of my new favorite words that I heard in 2019 is lawfare. The pursuit of goals through legal means. Using the law as a weapon. It's like, hey, boy, once someone came up with the word, all of a sudden you go, yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, it's better probably just a word for something that's existed for a really long time, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
words. Hey, words are magic. If you don't have the right word, you can't do the magic.
no, you can't. Words matter.
Hmm.
Yeah, they
Yes, they
really
do.
they really do. So getting back on the topic, what is your prediction of movies? Do you think we will go back to? Do you think they'll release at home and just increase the price? Like they have to figure out that box office ticket
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah, they do. it's interesting because it's all tied into this new media landscape where for years it was movies were movies and cable was cable. And, streaming is really changing things, over the top stuff. What does that mean? Is, no one's going to want to pay $8 a month to 20 different services. So, I wonder if someone will come along and be the aggregator of all of those services.
But
I
isn't
think,
that just a cycle? Because
oh,
look,
sure, absolutely.
here, we're on a podcast today. I mean, all the podcast is a radio channel that each of us have that are going to get aggregated into a channel. That's what radio was, right? It was one wavelength, wasn't it?
Well, it was and it wasn't. I think podcasting is very interesting because, look, you and I have been talking for an hour about whatever we want, and the audience finds you because they like what you have to say. Whereas, radio, those type of limited mass mediums were forced into conventions. They were forced into, it's like, hey, you have, if you're a shock jock, you have to get ears listening to you. You have to say things. You have to keep an audience. You have to apply by the conventions. That's actually a really interesting thing just in script writing and storytelling in general, which is that different genres have different conventions. If you violate the convention, your story sucks. That's why the most recent Star Wars trilogies sucked. They told the hero's journey story and forgot the hero's journey. And so the neat
Which
thing about
episodes, just for all the Star Wars fans that specifically, because you and I think have written a book on text on this, but which episodes are you referring to?
referring so that would be 7, 8, and 9. The most recent ones, the Disney ones, they're awful. They're awful top to bottom. They have
Well, I
no
think
redeeming
John, don't you
qualities
think John
whatsoever.
Favreau
Oh,
sort of saved whatever
absolutely.
shit he was given?
Yep. I mean, I would say that we should put up a statue to that man, except that it would be torn down because he's a white male. So like he absolutely,
Isn't
saved
he
it.
Italian or something? So he could say like that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So he could claim some type of aggrieved status. But
But
so interestingly enough, The Mandalorian is a Western. And
the Mandalorian is absolutely one of the best shows that I have seen in a very, very long time, done by a guy who actually gets
that's it.
it.
Yep.
Like,
absolutely.
I mean, this is the Ponderosa, right?
Yes, it is.
Bonanza.
Yep.
This is Weekly Bonanza, and I love it. And it's amazing. It's amazing that all the generations love it, right?
Mm-hmm. A story well told that is archetypally correct has extremely broad appeal. It's only when you start getting, it's when you start violating those conventions that it's wrong and people don't know why it's wrong.
I mean, when was Luke Skywalker ever when he comes out of that cave in that one and he's like sarcastic? It's the dumbest thing. Like whoever, I don't even know who the hell that was, but they did not understand Luke Skywalker. Like it looked like Luke Skywalker was on drugs to me.
Yeah, it was. I don't know how you buy a multi-billion-dollar franchise and not understand what the franchise is. It's kind of stunning to me. A part of me wants to go, where are all of the shareholders and the adults in the room who say it's like,
I don't think they cared, Donnie. I think they bought. I think they bought a cash cow because here's the truth. I think it sucked, but I wasn't going to miss it.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, so they made money. Okay, congratulations, your spreadsheet looks great. But here's what they missed, and what they missed is that Gen Xers had Star Wars, millennials had Harry Potter, and Gen Zers have nothing.
Well, don't they have Marvel?
I mean, you could say Marvel, but Marvel isn't taking the place of like the defining hero's journey that Star Wars did and that Harry Potter did.
Well, I have to agree. The Marvel stories, I like. I'm
I do
not
too.
gonna. I do like them, but they don't follow that hero's journey archetype close enough. And maybe that's their edge, or maybe they purposely do that. But it's certainly not as smooth, if that's
Mhm.
even the right way to
I know,
describe it.
I know what you mean. Yeah, they've got look, each individual superhero has a hero's journey, and we've seen all of their origin stories. But then when you start combining them in interesting ways, they become different stories. So like the Infinity War wasn't a hero's journey story, but you needed to tell a half dozen hero's journey stories to tell that story,
It was
which is like,
confusing. That was confusing to me. It was. I mean, I followed it, but it was confusing. You know what I mean? It was jumpy. I mean, it was. Yeah.
it's a hard story to tell. Like if you sit down and try to chart that story out and bring in all of these characters, like that's a hard movie to write and to write well and to not get lost in.
Yeah. You know what was also a one. I think I don't know what the heck. I like Wonder Woman. I think it's a
Yeah, me too.
great story. But the last one was it. I felt like someone maybe they stopped because of COVID and they restarted, and they didn't like remember where they left off. I mean, there was a few pieces there that were out of place to
Yeah,
me.
I haven't seen it. If you're talking
Uh,
about Wonder Woman 84,
yeah.
yeah, everyone I talked to said it wasn't so great, but
No, I mean,
whatever.
here's why it was great, because it was the newest thing we've seen in 12 freaking months that wasn't a rerun that I've seen before. I mean that they after the Mandalorian was over, I don't remember what the hell I've seen new. I mean, although I will say that Netflix, I don't know how they've got it done, but Netflix had some interesting stuff. Are you working at all with Netflix with the safety stuff? I mean, you
Uh,
don't care
I
at all.
I'm not at the
No?
moment. Hmm.
Are you? Is this new company? If you are you able to work more in LA versus these crazy travel schedule you had
Oh yeah,
before?
I mean, being at least on the business development side of it, I'm working from home now. This is a shipping container, my shop that's in my backyard, and now it's my Zoom office. And yeah, I do all of my work for at least the last few months here. I've had to run out and kind of fix some brush fires on some shows, but hopefully this is my new gig and I can
What
go
is that?
anywhere.
A 20 by 8 container?
It's yeah, 20 by 8.
Yeah, so you converted that thing. I was wondering up top there what that, yeah, your ceiling. I couldn't get a 20, so 20 by 8 is 160. Were you able to put that in your backyard without a permit?
Yeah, I craned it over. I craned it over the wall. Drop off lid.
What?
Mhm.
Oh, well, I'm building up an actual studio in my backyard. It is 15 by 7.5. If it's under 120 square foot, you don't have to,
You should get a permit. Interesting.
you don't
Yeah,
have
so it's like
to,
a shed. It's like a glorified shed. That's what
yeah.
Ian did. That's what Ian dropped in his backyard.
Did he do that too?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I need to call him. I haven't talked to him in a while. He probably glad he doesn't have to go into work from home. But so
Secretly, I think a lot of people are there. No one likes COVID, and but I think secretly a lot of people weren't happy with their lives pre-COVID, and COVID's given them a chance to re-examine it. One of my friends who works at the tracker school in New Jersey, they call 2020 Enforced Vision Quest 2020, where it's like you get to go to your room and think about what you've done. And I think there's a little bit of truth to that.
yeah, I have to say that I am an introvert. That's a whole interesting discussion, isn't it? Because
Hmm.
introverts actually, this whole introvert extrovert, something blew my mind. I was reading a book by a neuroscientist psychologist that basically has, now they've proven that this right brain, left brain thing is not even right. No pun intended. So it really blew my mind because of this, that has implications that go uh, really far in explaining things when you talk about the primate brain and all of these types of things and how advertising works. I'm going to try to have her on the podcast because it's quite interesting. But just because you're an introvert, you actually like attention. But my uh, Yvette we have the same dentist, and he said, Brandon, and I hadn't been to the dentist because I just lost track of time. I try to be very diligent about going to the dentist. But he said, Brandon was built for this. You know, he just likes it. And I, you know, I think it, I think what it has, I hope that people took advantage of the opportunity to be home and remember who they live with. If they live with anyone, and if they don't, who they really are. You know, like, I mean, really a blessing in disguise. Quite frankly, Donnie, it's vindication for me because I can't tell you how many people over the last 20 years have told me that you can't build a company remotely. And it is absolutely amazing to me that even though the place is a total show, it's still going on. People are still making money. Things are still happening. And they're working remotely. Amazingly, you can do things outside the office. What do you think of it? Do you think the office is dead?
I think big chunks of it are. I think that, that iron triangle of the mortgage, the car payment, and the office. I don't think we can actually afford it anymore. I think it's a vestige of like 1950s, 1960s business, and it's just carrying on for momentum reasons.
You don't think the business can afford it anymore because they got so lean?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be an interesting thing to look at, how much of downtowns were, how much downtown square footage is office space. And it's like, well, we haven't needed it for the last year. So do we need it? Question mark. It's like, well, what happened to productivity? Because I mean, ultimately, like the right answer is always what happened to productivity. And, given that the vast majority of jobs are shuffling paper from, one inbox to another inbox, productivity probably didn't suffer. And
Well,
so,
only thing I'll say on that, hold your thought, is that I will acknowledge this. Working from home can be incredibly hard. You solved it by putting most people are not going to crane a container or build a studio in their backyard.
right.
And I will say I've been really lucky in my life to have worked from home or been able to have a home office, let's say. Work from home and have a home office is different. And that little difference that I've just suggested is really what has to happen. And that you have to create a home office that's different from your home, where you will go do your laundry. You will, there's like dishes you got to do. There's, I don't know, you could do things in the backyard. You're like, oh, well, Home Depot and whatever the other place is, Lowe's, were packed. Why? Because everybody's like, well, let's do a construction project. Well, you got to ask yourself, how did that work during the workday? But, so I just want to acknowledge out there's probably a bunch of people listening like, oh, that Brandon's saying that this is like so easy. It is not easy to work from home, but I do think productivity didn't dip, or we wouldn't have a lot of infrastructure and a lot of things that still have existed.
Yeah.
Including government.
That's an interesting thing. You're always wondering, you look at any structure, you look at any institution, and it's like, how did it got there? Well, it got there through momentum, and how much of it is just there because it's the way we've always done it, and how much of it is there because it's actually the right thing to have in that position at any given time. That's one of the things that a crisis does, is it shows you what's important and what's not. Like there's the creative destruction aspect of it is that, in one sense, you need these little. Imagine what the world would be like if there were never any crises that caused you to reevaluate what you were doing and how you were doing it. It would be the definition of a tyranny.
I think that's a life of an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Truthfully, it's just like you get some success or you go through a crisis and then another one happens, and those are the learning moments when you actually like really fundamentally understand maybe not only yourself, but business and actually how the numbers do work, right? Like that's when the raw numbers just say, okay, here's how it really works. And here's what we really need to focus on. I think that's the key. So you're going to keep doing this safety thing? But you did say you thought you might go back. I mean, I just want to say, I think it's super brave of you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah, go with it. I mean, it's working out, and who knows, maybe it all flows into one another, right? Maybe the armor business, like you've said, it's not too far apart. The only thing, you're just protecting people from shooting themselves or doing something stupid, stabbing themselves versus catching a disease. I mean, it is and can be the same space. I say I worry. I wonder how long that can be, and maybe you just evolve into something, that turns into something bigger because you're already there.
It certainly could. I'll tell you what, the one thing about this job that's been very interesting is, when you're working as the COVID officer on a set, you're making go, no go decisions for the entire production. In one sense, it has certain producer-like qualities where it's like, hey, the director just called, their kid is sick, what do we do? It's like, okay, give me, detail. And all of a sudden you're in a huddle with, you're in a huddle with all the power players figuring out how to solve this problem. It's interesting. COVID is now kind of like the limiting reagent in the reaction. And so a good COVID guy can save a production. It can keep it from shutting down. It's strange. And no one knows, I'm not gonna say no one knows what they're doing. I'm gonna say that people are figuring this out as we go. In one sense, it is, I suffer a lot from imposter syndrome, and I don't here in this space because no one knows what the right answer is. Everyone is discovering it. It's a brand new thing. No one's ever had to tackle these questions. No one's ever had to come up with these answers. And I find it interesting. It's definitely out there on that edge of proximal development, outside of the comfort zone, but still doable. And it's an interesting place to be.
Well, I think that in many ways, you guys and ladies there have a huge responsibility, because I actually think America, if not the world, relies on movies and TV shows. And I don't know whether it's good or bad, Donnie, because, apparently people on the Ponderosa survived without video games and movies. But the world really relies on these things for happiness and escape and a break, and in many ways, like we were talking about earlier, to explain what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things our culture dropped along the way was, initiation ceremonies, like, manhood ceremonies, rites of passage might be a different way to say it. And one of the ways that where that's still modeled is in movies, especially heroes' journey stories. It's a lot of people followed along with Harry Potter in his trials and tribulations and his difficulties, and that, vicarious, it's not as good as doing it yourself, but it definitely is a model for behavior, which at some deep level is what an archetype is supposed to be. And for better or worse, that's what our civilization has. We've outsourced our archetypes to film and television.
It's true, and I think it's a dependence that I will say this. I found it very interesting that when sports shut down, that even shifted more responsibility. If that's I don't know if it's responsibility, but weight, right? I actually found myself a lot less stressed, to be candid. I didn't have to watch the Warriors. I didn't have to watch football. Well, football, that was a little stressful, but it turned out well this year. Um, not if you're a Ravens fan, but we made it to the playoffs, so that was good. But, it really relieved this, I don't know, maybe it was an addiction and didn't really realize it, right? These are the types of things. But then there was, okay, well, what's on TV? What are the stories? So it really is amazing how Hollywood has become the storyteller for most of the world. Depends on it, right?
I mean, certainly up until the current point, other countries are starting to do a lot of their own production now. But yeah, absolutely. Hollywood was, cultural exports were America's main product and America's main weapon. I mean, that's what took down the Soviet Union was Coca-Cola, blue jeans, and movies. Um, so yeah, as the dominant culture on the planet, our stories are the ones that people listen to. And I don't know if that's good or bad or not, because it's there's I don't know if it's good or bad. I often wonder if we're doing a good enough job and take the responsibility enough. There's some perverse incentives on the profit motive side of things, where really some very good stories don't get told, and stories that should be very good and do a very important job in society get butchered. Star Wars, the most recent Star Wars ones, for instance, like there's a hole there. There's a hole where the right Star Wars saga should have been. And you have an entire generation of people who are waiting for their Star Wars or their Harry Potter. I mean, I've often joked with you that I want to do a startup and give me $50 million and I will go find the next archetypal story that's going to be the next Star Wars. You got to vacuum up a humongous amount of stuff, and you have to be looking for things very particular. But like, okay, it wasn't Hunger Games. There's a long list of shows that were like stuck their toe in the pool but weren't the thing. And it's very interesting, what is Gen Z's Star Wars or Harry Potter going to look like? And I think that Disney had a chance with Star Wars to make it Star Wars. And that's what they messed up. And so it's not going to show up anywhere on the spreadsheet. Failure to achieve archetypal significance for an entire generation.
No, but as you're talking, also Hollywood is responsible for educating kids. I mean, what's Pixar? Like, I mean, you think about that. I mean, just think of the implications of that. It's a lot to unpack there, and
Huge.
it definitely has an enormous impact on our culture. So in many ways, I don't know who's driving the bus down there, but I'd like to have dinner with them and talk to them and figure out what they got planned for the next 20 years.
I don't think there's anyone driving the bus, like in anything. It's like in any, everyone's heard the term military industrial complex. I think you can add the term industrial complex to the end of most of our systems. We have a health industrial complex. We have a media industrial complex.
Yeah, but who did Uncle Buck and Breakfast Club? Like who was that?
John Hughes.
Yeah, like who's the next?
Will he be allowed to make those stories, or will they say, oh no, sorry, you've got to hire the following groups of people, you've got to tell your story like this, because we have to, and chanting, in certain countries can't be the bad guys anymore, or we won't get DOD approval. It's all of those interesting constraints on the artist. And what stories today from your favorite movies to go back to kind of the whole social justice thing, what of your favorite stories couldn't be made today? I'm going to say a lot of them. A lot of your favorite movies you could not make Blazing Saddles right now. Guarantee it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Right? Blazing Saddles always made me a little uncomfortable, even as a kid. It
was supposed to.
Well, yeah, it might have, but it did its job. it felt a little over the line to me, but I can understand for sure as I think back what you're saying, that there's a ton of shows. But here's what I will say. I think it's dangerous to erase history.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that those things are right. I mean, like, some of that stuff was just blatant, and some of the language and some of the way they treat people. But that's a characterization of where we came from.
Mm-hmm.
And to erase it leaves a hole that nobody can learn from. So someone would have to help me explain, if you were a person that wanted to erase history, how that works.
I think 1984 was not supposed to be an instruction manual. It's supposed to be a warning. And, the idea of things going down the memory hole, that they never happened. I don't know if there's a wonderful series of photos of Stalin surrounded by his core group of guys, Molotov and all of these different guys. And in official Soviet state pictures, you can watch them one by one be removed from the scene as they displeased Stalin or whatever. And they were removed literally from history. It's a totalitarian impulse.
Well, just imagine this. Okay, Donnie, you are who you are today, but we're going to erase your memory. So all the lessons, all the mistakes, right? That either, I'll use me because I don't know, maybe you didn't make any mistakes, but I don't want to pick on you, but the all the mistakes I made, right? Like, there's no way that I was perfect. There were mistakes that I made that I apologize for, and I feel, I acknowledge that they weren't the right decision. But whatever state I was in at that moment, I made that decision for whatever reason, and I've got to accept responsibility for it. I think that's why you don't erase history, because you learn from it and you take responsibility for it, and you acknowledge that it's not right, so that whomever you're interacting with, or whoever you influence, or whatever your group of people that you're able to share with, can learn from that lesson and understand that it's not right to do that. Because if you don't have those lessons, then how do you get the compass to be in the right place? I mean, everybody makes mistakes. Countries make mistakes. Societies make mistakes. It's let's self-correct and get there. But this whole erasing of history, that's like, well, I saw a thing going around that says that Dr. Seuss isn't going to publish 6 books anymore, not because anybody's burning books, but because they believe it doesn't characterize people. And, that's an interesting thing. Maybe they should just correct the damn book and, but don't erase the book. I have no problem with, they're the artist. If they don't feel that what's being portrayed there is the right way to portray things, that's on them, not me. But
okay, let's tie this back to Star Wars and the special editions where, the whole Han fired first or Greedo fired first thing. Like, can you go back to a piece of culture?
Who did fire first, by the way?
Han, always Han. No matter what anyone else says, that's the correct answer. Han fires first.
Well, you gave me the original. What did you do? You got that
Despecialized edition? Yeah.
The what?
The despecialized edition that I gave you?
I keep that on my computer at all times in case I'm somewhere and because it's so crystal clear, and it's like listening to original vinyl album that hasn't been opened in 40 years on a good stereo with a good speaker. Like, it just doesn't compare to digital music.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that was the real film, right?
Mm-hmm. It was a project that was put together because an original copy of the original release of Star Wars no longer exists. So he assembled one from multiple different sources, and then like some retired people at ILM got involved and sent him like cells, original effects cells that he took new pictures of, like total work of art, passion project. And you know what? No one will ever do that for episode 7, 8, or 9, ever. No one will dedicate their whole life to digitally, restoring as an individual those stories, because they're not worth it. And
I
that's
mean,
kind of
even the sound is, and that was Dolby sound back then, but it wasn't, at where it is today. But those are incredible. I feel lucky to have got those from you.
I feel lucky to have found them and to have been able to share them. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, that someone went to that effort unpaid because it was so important to them. Like that means something. You know what I mean? Like that's the storytelling at its best, can have that level of meaning. How meaningful was it? Oh, I don't know. He dedicated a couple thousand hours unpaid to this thing. Like that's powerful stuff. You know what I mean? And I wish that Hollywood as an industry could do that more often, and I wish that there was more room for more of those artists and filmmakers to take risks, and to be edgy and to say things, because you don't know, I think you really touched on it when you talked about, like, the reason not to erase the past is because of error correction. He who wins is the person who adapts fastest. And the better your error correction, the better your decision making over time, the bigger your success rate in anything, in entrepreneurial activities, in dating, in your relationship with anybody. It's like, who recognizes that they made a mistake faster, and who can correct that mistake better, faster, iteratively over time. That really, I mean, that's evolution in a nutshell.
There you
And
go.
yeah,
So
yeah.
can't
And if you
can't
take that,
erase it.
yeah, if you take away the feedback system, then you quite literally have taken away your mechanism for growth and finding something new. Because, why is tyranny bad? Like, if there was one right way to be, you'd think we would have found it already. The problem, though, is the world keeps changing, and the most successful thing in the world yesterday could literally be the nail in your coffin today. And you have to be able to let old bad things die, and you have to have mechanisms for discovering what the new solutions to the problems are that you don't even know about yet. And that's really what's so dangerous about all this cancel culture stuff. It's not just the canceling, it's not just the erasing, it's that it's materially affecting our ability to solve life-ending problems that we're going to be faced with in the future. It's so bad on so many levels. I
I
don't
think
even
it's
know if
I
there's a
think
word.
it I think it's depressing people, quite candidly. And I don't want to leave anyone depressed, but that I think that we're in this like negative, we're focused on the negative, and the really our enemies are the ones who are winning, because now we've got an inward narrative that America isn't great. That's basically what I hear. I don't believe it. And I think that for all of our flaws, I don't know another country that has the potential or the ability, contrary to what not everybody, but some people want to paint out there, that if you don't get the luck of the draw, then you can't do that. I understand disadvantage. I can't say, well, I've experienced at some level, but no, of course I can't. I don't know. Yvette is Spanish. I can't say that I've experienced her world, or I can't even experience what a woman experiences, which some of the stuff I hear, I think, is absolutely absurd. That they go through. Like, it's beyond how at least I was raised. So I'll leave it at that. But America is still a great place. Like you can come, there's so many stories of and potential, right? Yes, there, you know, group people always are going to be in groups, and you always are going to identify with that group, which in effect separates you from the rest. That maybe you and I like 3D printing, and then everybody calls us a geek. And, you could be like, oh, well, don't call us a geek. We're just different. We're just introverts. We want to print. Like, there's always going to be that. So I think we need to accept some level of human nature, but don't put us in a position that America's not great. Like America is a great thing. And if we ruin the great thing, then that's on us. And whoever wants to do that better have a damn good plan, because there may never be a time when, and there may never be a time again in history when that many smart people get together to literally found a country and go through the process like the Federalist Papers and 100 other things that they wrote, met, and did to build what we have.
I completely agree. And the closer we can get to that model for all of its flaws, the better we are, the better we will be.
I mean, every entrepreneur success, like you can come here and have nothing and get something. So I think we're going to leave people on a positive note tonight, that they can do that, and that you can have you were working in the industry 23 years, you were 17 years as an armor, and switch jobs. And basically you adapted in a crisis. Your whole industry shut down. Mm-hmm. And then you changed to take skills that you have in something else to build yourself into something new. And I'm excited for you.
Thanks, man. Me too.
So I think I'll be in LA next week, and I'll shoot you a text, and maybe we can catch up at an outside dining place.
I'd love to.
Good to see you, man.
Good seeing you too.
Thanks a lot.
No worries, man. Take care.